this little bit of energy goes back into the universe to be recycled, and that actually might lead to reincarnation.
In fact, a journey on your own is the most loneliest journey you could ever go on.
This cat identifies as a dog.
Welcome to this episode of our little show In the Room. We've been exploring a new scientist article on the universe and whether or not it is conscious. So what were your thoughts on what you read? Consciousness.
I was nearly unconscious after the end of the article and realized how unaccustomed to mathematical technobabble I really am. Now, I said, I read the article, I thought it was going to be about something else altogether. And I said, my God, there's some very technical stuff here and very, mathematical assumptions on how to quantify the universe. Actually, quantify the consciousness of the universe. We can't quantify the consciousness of a table. Never mind the universe. And this is what the article says. Because in order to arrive at a mathematical equation that will actually, define or quantify consciousness, we have to make certain assumptions. And these assumptions might include that everything has a level of consciousness, from the table to the ground to a flower to you. Never mind the actual consciousness of an individual. So, what I sort of remember now was this one term, phi, I think it's called.
Phi, yep.
It reminded me of pi. And I was going, okay, this is a new term to me, phi. I think you were going to explain, George.
Actually, phi is it's a number which I think is. So see if I can find the mathematical number for phi. Phi is basically there's a little symbol that's like a circle with a stroke through it, and it's 1.618 blah 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 to infinity. There's a whole load of numbers that come off it.
This is my head, George. There's what came into my mind when I heard it's a number. I remember Sesame Street, and today's number is 4. Not today's number is 5. It's 1.364 to infinity.
Well, what becomes crucial about this is that it's a number that's been used throughout the ages. The Greeks use it, the Romans use it, everybody's been using. All the artists, Da Vinci used it, and it's called the golden number. And I used it.
It's not infinity, though.
Sorry.
It's like, isn't it like there's the alpha, there's the omega, and there's infinity, the symbol for infinity. But phi is this other circle with a line through it. So, is it another infinity, or it's a number which is not infinity because that's that other line down number 8, or is that something else?
I think it's something else. Now, what phi as the golden number refers to is if you. Like Fibonacci used these numbers, which was if you take phi as a symbol and you the square of phi equals phi plus 1. So if you
infinity plus 1, no?
Yeah, infinity plus 1. Now what they were doing was if phi squared is 0 plus 1, then the result becomes 1. If you then add phi as 1 and you add 1 to 1, it becomes 2. Yeah,
they're going.
But you're adding. If you
plus 1 is 2, I'm up.
No. 1 plus 1 is 2. Yes, but 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 13.
But then, look, we're going to be here till doomsday, and doomsday is probably quite close. I'm saying to get to infinity plus 1 for phi, it's going to take forever and a day.
Wow.
No, actually,
if you then start to think about it, it's actually the spiral. You create spirals from that, where you then get the sunflower spirals. You're back to the Fibonacci numbers. You then have storms, hurricanes. If you look at the top of a hurricane, the actual wave going out, especially if you look at the weather and the big storms that come in, the pattern that comes in, they're using Fibonacci numbers to actually form the spirals. The universe uses it.
Going off to the land of Oz, and she was caught up in this typhoon or this storm, and she in terms of, and she ended up in a different level of consciousness.
Yes.
When you think of the film, she was a different level of consciousness. Now that could bring in possibly parallel universes, or actually where the article sort of started mirror over was, we have our internal level of consciousness, and when I start looking a little bit deeper, and the mind's eye, and from Egypt,
let's take that a little bit further, because one of the things it was saying was that technically, now it's just because I have this close to me. Here is a lens. This lens, if you go by what that article was saying, has a conscience. Now the difficulty is that I know you have a conscience because you're talking to me, you can communicate to me, and I know that when I'm seeing other people, they do the same thing. But when they die, you can't communicate to them in the same kind of way. There's something missing, there's something lacking, there's something different.
Well, I'm going to jump back in and go, we're all made of stars, including the table. So if you think about it, I could come back as a table a later date, in the sense of my molecules are intermixed with some other immovable object.
One of the videos I was watching, one of the videos I was looking at, which is a kind of new age thing, was called The Universe Within, and it was actually looking at how Wilhelm Reich, a German psychologist who ended up in disrepute, he actually discovered that there was an energy in us. And they started to look at things and suddenly noticed that when a flower actually died, you were talking about the stars, he could actually record this energy that was leaving the dying plants, and it looked like lights, like stars, but it was life. He could see what was life. He could record life, and it had moved away. What was left was a crumpled, dark, black object that was dead. It had no conscience. It had no life.
What reminds me of is, again, it was some sort of YouTube video you put me onto there yesterday. You'll probably remember the name as opposed to me, but it was talking about, actually, it was Ancient Aliens. Yeah. I'm mistaken it. And it was talking about this big egg-type structure. And on this egg-type structure, there was actually a line and, intertwined what looked like serpents. Now, this symbols is reappearing at many parts of the planets at different timelines. And it was saying this egg is and this symbol together is actually representing DNA and the fact of seeding the planet potentially, and it's a symbolic representation of DNA and the messages possibly hidden within it, and this was then again mirrored across the planet from Egyptians to
one of the other videos I was looking at had the same kind of thing. It was looking at how life is created and what do you need to have life, and they were finding that there's little bits of water, but they actually discovered was that if they took all the DNA out of the water, there was actually broken down bits of DNA that were split, and they gradually merged together and formed DNA again and started to create life. So as long as you've got DNA somewhere in the universe, it can actually connect itself up to form life. That's what the article was claiming.
Now, we're back to going, what constitutes life? Is it, there's life and then there's consciousness. And like what we say, we might be more conscious than an animal or an amoeba. But I mean, the amoeba is life and we're life. But and then we might both emanate energy. But what volume of energy? Like if we were to die and then this little bit of energy goes back into the universe to be recycled and then somewhere else or later on. And that actually might lead to reincarnation in the context of that energy is refunneled back into a new soul that at a later time is able to draw on this energy plus DNA to avail of some sort of past recording. If you think of energy as waves, then ultimately these waves are the recordings of previous life or life to date for that consciousness or elements of consciousness. And maybe you think you might actually wake up and remember different lives. And effectively what it is you're actually a reconstitution of multiple pieces of consciousness forming a new combination going forward of personality in a body or vessel that then travels its life cycle on the planet. Now, if you think of back to the article about is the universe conscious, or is it the fact that we're the building blocks of the universe, and the universe is a global consciousness of all the little pieces of life within it?
Now that becomes something quite interesting, because we're talking about the universe, but we're talking about materialistic things, and we're talking about records, and records are materialistic things again. But in a way, we're talking about something that's spiritual. So if it's spiritual, it's not materialistic, so it can't record things in the way that we've interpreted as being records of things from the past.
And this is our problem. This is back to the article. Its problem it's having is if you want to define consciousness, it's infinity plus one. If you want to measure consciousness, it's a computer capability, which is a material thing that has to be able to calculate infinity plus one on a regular basis for an infinite number of bodies, well, a couple of billion people on the planet, if you want to capture just the global consciousness of planet Earth at a point in time of what might constitute intellectual consciousness. But to actually then, if you can't measure a planet's consciousness, or even actually in this case an individual's consciousness, what chance have you to actually define or measure the global or universal consciousness?
Well, isn't then the problem that if you're trying to measure, you've got the thing wrong? The fact that you're trying to measure something that can't be measured, it's in fact, if it's infinity plus
you can't
one,
measure it
it's infinity.
Because we're on the inside trying to measure the outside.
Well, that's if there is an inside or an outside. There may not be anything. I mean, that's the idea about the Buddhist and the Eastern types of religions. They actually talk about Hinduism. It's more Buddhism. It's about nothingness, returning. That's where they're going to. Is this kind of idea of nothingness?
Well, it's either nothing or something. See, it's like saying 0 or 1. It's something or it's nothing. Actually, infinity plus 1 is still infinity. And actually, if you haven't measured infinity, then any number shorter than it can actually be rounded down to nearly nothing. Yeah. So actually, you do it or you don't. It's not that there's a positive or a negative. It either exists or it doesn't. It doesn't half exist. So, but maybe we're half lives.
Let's put something in, because we're talking about a universe which is a materialistic thing. The planet is a materialistic thing. We're a materialistic thing, and we eventually come. We know from physics that basically all energy is there's cause and effect. So if you create something to move, the energy goes into it and it disperses, but you never lose the energy. It may stop, but it transforms into something else. Okay,
based on what you've said, that's our mathematics going.
Well, that's it, yeah. But if we go back to the idea, we're talking about materialistic things. You mentioned the idea that if you record this, we talked about recording, and you also talked about that you have to do something. In other words, there's an agent. And I think in a lot of these things, we start talking about things, which is where the idea of there's a conscious in a book or a conscious in a stone, but we forget about the agent. What is the agent? And that's where most people start, because they've gone away from the idea of religion. They've gone away from, they even the agency of government, something governing us that's outside of us, that's trying to force us to do something and govern our behavior, again, is all materialistic kind of endeavors. But there has to be an agent that creates the effect in the first place, that creates the force.
Now, again, we're back to the language of this is like a cat trying to define the box it's in if it's Schrödinger's cat. It's a cat. It's going, but it knows it's in it knows it's in something. It doesn't know what the name of it is a human word for box. Yeah. But it's in. Is it in the box? Because the human put it in there, or maybe it isn't in there. Is it alive? Is it dead? Does it know it's alive or dead? Is it a reincarnation of my Auntie Bunny? I don't even know. But either which way, what's a cat? Some human word made up for this bunch of molecules or atoms put together in a certain order.
Well, that's why
that has a
when you start to study media, you start to look at signs and symbols. And when we actually talk, we see the sign of the word cat. We then relate it to a visual image of what we see as a representation of a cat, because it has 4 legs, ears, eyes, and whatnot. But it could be a dog. And how do we differentiate between those? But we're just using language to differentiate between them.
This cat identifies as a dog. It doesn't. It's actually taking on humans or from its aunt and its owner that they're transgender, cross-dressing, God knows what. It doesn't matter. This cat identifies as a dog. It doesn't know what it is. Its level of measurement and understanding is based on its level of self-consciousness
or its interpretation of the environment.
Conscious universe. Yeah. Now, you were talking about earlier on about Schrödinger's cat is an interesting one in the sense of the observer affects the state the cat is in or isn't in the box or not in the box. We're in the universe. We're on the planet Earth. We're the cat in the box of a level of awareness of ourselves as being human and the gods of the universe, but we don't know that there isn't our own equivalent observing us as whether we're here or not, or conscious or not, or aware of the observer that we cannot define.
Which is still an agent, which is still interesting. Because in reality, I'm in a box that happens to be 12 foot by 10 foot, surrounded by lights. You're in a slightly bigger box. But both of us, through the conversation that we're having at some distance, are able to picture as we're discussing things, we're talking about the universe, our mind is probably filling up with images of stars and Milky Ways and galaxies as we define what that is. And then when we start to talk about stones and cameras and cats and dogs, we suddenly have a cat and dog in our heads, which brand we don't know.
Well, it's very interesting. If E.T. or God or a more benevolent being is observing what's the equivalent of two ants and two boxes on a planet in a point in time, having a conversation about their own consciousness, lack thereof, or is there something else in the universe that's consciously aware of these two equivalent ants having a chat about,
and they're having a good old giggle about it and sharing it on their version of YouTube.
They're just going to stand on us, and it's all over before we even know. And in that blink of the eye, our energy goes back to the subconscious universe to be reconstituted at a later date in a table on a different planet, possibly.
In a spreadsheet.
Yeah, and
no, wrong table.
In sense of the article you were saying at the beginning, it was only a 5-page article. Excuse me. I'm sure you'll mention the name after the end of this. I found it very, very interesting, and a couple of things popped out. And I was talking about this level of for us to be able, for the scientists to be able to quantify the consciousness of the universe, they're going to have to come up with a different set of maths, because the maths we have is too simple to be able to actually define it. So they arrived at phi and probably a bunch of other bits and pieces with a bunch of assumptions and probabilities, and they're going to chuck it all together and arrive at some equation that will then define being on a global, on a macro, on a micro, on a universal astral level, whatever. But what was interesting was they started to talk about the level of computing power based on our capabilities at the moment. It might take a billion data centers to actually arrive at the answer of the pi number for just one individual's level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Now, actually, I was thinking, to get to that number, the actual computer will actually be arriving at its own level of consciousness and self-awareness in terms of its capability to be able to actually quantify and calculate this number. So on its journey to calculate my level of consciousness, it becomes self-aware. We're actually on the journey to Skynet. We're on the journey to artificial intelligence becoming self-aware, and it's now Terminator time in order just to satisfy a new equation to capture consciousness or measure.
Well, that becomes interesting, because if it's AI and it's become conscious, does it become spiritual because it's become conscious, or does that go back to what the behaviorists have with saying that we don't have a spirit, we don't have a mind, and we don't have all those other things? Let me just give you the title before we go, because the feature cover story was called Here, There, Everywhere, with a question mark, by a guy called Michael Brooks. And it was actually in the New Scientist on page 40 on the 2nd of May 2020. And it says, it's our best mathematical models of consciousness might imply everything has got it. Here, how serious should we take this?
That's an essay, right? All I heard was here, there, everywhere. So I was reminded of a Scarlet Pimpernel. Now, I was going, you seek him here, you seek him there. I don't know what the last piece was. He was everywhere. And because it's like, that's it. We are everywhere. If we start saying that this is one universal consciousness, then you're saying then we're just one of the sum of the parts. Therefore, it's like you said, you cannot, if it's bound by a vessel, we're saying some sort of universal vessel bounding a universe, then in there, says that all your parts are going to, one disappears here and moves over there, the sum of the parts is always the same, therefore this energy doesn't actually dissipate outside the external vessel container. We are all one with the universe. We are the universe. The universe, by definition, is a sum of the whole, or the whole of the sum of the parts. So therefore, it's not mutually exclusive. Within us, in the Fibonacci numbers, then we're saying on a micro level is we contain the universe. We contain everyone. We are here. We are there. We are everywhere. We are every when. Come to think of it.
Well, that becomes interesting, because from different religions, the idea behind Buddhism is that you reach nirvana when you become one with the universe. And it's not that you're the only one, it's just that you're one with the collective consciousness of that whole universe. In Christianity, the idea is that the Holy Spirit is that consciousness, and we become one with the consciousness at some point when we get to heaven, if you like.
No, but we always one to begin with, because we are one when we're one. We're not none, we're some. Therefore, we were one with the universe before, during, afterwards, and everywhere, and every when. Therefore, it's only our level of consciousness then becomes self-aware that we are one, have been one, will be one, always will be one. Therefore, enjoy the now.
Well, you see, one of the things I remember as a 7-year-old, and I remember going at Stony Stratford Primary School back in Buckinghamshire. There's a group of us used to stand at the gate talking, philosophizing as 7-year-olds what is the world really all about? And we were starting to talk about this idea that if we went round the corner, does everybody just stop? A bit like the Westworld kind of idea that all the robots were, they didn't actually operate unless you actually saw them. We were going back to the idea of the particle and the wave. Does light travel as a particle or wave, depending on the way that you look at it? Or does it change after you've stopped looking at it? And how do we know that people exist beyond our own? Now that
actually, you reminded me now of, I think it's called, I was trying to remember the name of the Far Side cartoon series. Yeah. And the cows are in the field, and when the people are driving by in the car, and as soon as the car goes by, the cows all stand up and start having a chat.
Yes.
It's only the observer was like, it's this observation. They're animals. When we're not looking, we're the animals, and they're acting normal. So is this are we the far side? Actually, are we the far side? Now, you mentioned 3 numbers in the sense of we're either nothing, being 0, or we're 1, we're whole, or infinity is just a sum of all the ones. It's like it's everyone, everything, everywhere, all energy. It's infinity plus 1. So actually, because we're going, that plus 1 might be this external observer, because we're saying we can never get there. We cannot explain the plus 1. We cannot define the plus 1. That's beyond our realm of understanding. That's what the journey of all our scientists and experts is to actually quantify the plus 1. If I don't exist, and actually I think there's a couple of theories out there whereby about the materialistic thing of items, like the table is not solid.
Yeah.
Other for the fact that my mind tells me to expect it to be solid, and when I touch it, I feel it. But my consciousness, this body might not even be solid. These molecules are an extension of my own consciousness. This entire universe is an extension of my own consciousness. They are, if it's like the Matrix. If those ones and zeros, if I so deem the code, get the access to the code, I can pass through what looks like material because only I'm telling myself it's material. If we're in this world, like we only see what's closest to us, and everything like down the road is only self-fulfilling in terms of, let's say, gameology. It's like the animation and gaming. It's creating itself into existence as we get closer enough to perceive it. But it doesn't exist beyond our level of perception, and doesn't need to. We just need to know it's there when we get there, and when we get there, it is there, and it's materialized, and it's to our understanding. But like an awful lot of the Marvel films and this or the DC type films is, and Doctor Strange, if we can get control of this capability, we can manipulate the universe around us and create new ones. And that's how, if you think of Dreamland, we can create anything in our dreams and have any power we want. Some of the time I'm just doing spreadsheets in there when I can be Superman. It's nonsense.
Well, isn't that the point? That if you become aware, if you can visualize in your own mind what you want, which is what part of the discussion earlier on today was, that if you can visualize what you want, you can make it come into being. You can create that thing to actually happen just by visualizing what you want to be doing. And that's what leads you to where you hope to go.
Yes.
That sets you off on your journey. But
this is back to the last conversation last podcast we had, which was saying, who are you? What this is the me inside. I'm going the inner voice. It's, everything else is a material representation, the clothes, the voice, the car, the house. Is this an extension of me? Oh, okay, I could be living in a 1-bedroom shack in the woods because I just wasn't able to get in harmony with the universe, to get the external materialistic wrappings to be who I think I am. I don't think I'm the Prince of Dubai. I'm not going to dress myself up with like flowing robes and white Arabian horses running in around the garden. That's not an external representation of who I believe I am. But everyone believes they're somebody or can become something, and they may or may not follow that journey to the land of Oz and to follow the yellow brick road of the universe and going, what do you want from the wizard? What's behind the curtain? Who's on the inside here? What do you actually look like with your branded exterior, with your happiness definition, and with you at one with the universe?
But the interesting thing is that if you are focusing on what you want constantly, you end up becoming quite self-centered, because you'll then start and say, well, look, I just want to be rich. I want to be rich. I want to be rich. And then you suddenly kind of go, but when I actually get there, I'm not satisfied. So there's something wrong. So I want to be richer and richer and richer. And then I'm still not satisfied. Whereas if you then suddenly begin to realize that actually the money, which is gradually going to be taken out of our society anyway, won't exist. It will exist only as digits. You won't be able to physically touch it in the not too distant future. You suddenly kind of realize, well, actually, what I really want to be is happy. And having all those materialistic things doesn't necessarily make me happy. I need to find out what the true meaning of being here and being given this opportunity to live on this planet actually is. And quite often, it's not what you try to do for yourself. It's what you do for other people. It's how you make their lives better. And if you can share, in fact, a journey on your own is the most loneliest journey you could ever go on. The best journey is the ones where you get to share with other people, because you have something to talk about. You have stories to actually tell.
That's it. We had a conversation earlier again. I was on, I'm already happy at a level of definition of, today, this moment, having this conversation, a conversation we wouldn't otherwise have if a set of events didn't, align together to create an opportunity to have a very strange, existential, weird conversation, see where it goes. Am I happy? I am happy in this moment, right now. No, a different measure of happiness. Am I happy with my family? Yes, I am. Would I change anything in the past to arrive at a different now? I go, no, because the gambles and the permutation and combinations to then arrive here with a different set of circumstances of a bigger car, a bigger house, more money. The gamble is too much to lose the present happiness of the family you have. Would you have a son more, a daughter less? Would they be older, smaller, fatter, thinner? Would they be any healthier? I know the whole point is it's the perfect now. The permutation and combinations of the universe and any Fibonacci number out there that led to this set of circumstances for me and my inner me and my recognition and self-awareness of my consciousness of whether these things are even figments of my imagination. I'm a happy bunny. I'm a pig in shit. I am happy right now, and I'd like to have another now in a couple of moments and be just as happy.
Well, let's just think about that. You're talking about figments of our imagination. Effectively, what we plan to do in 2, 3, 4 years' time, what we think we should have in place, like we planned to go to Canada to see our grandchildren in June, and we thought, right, okay, we could visualize us getting there, and now all of a sudden we've been hit by this pandemic. We can't move. We can't go from one place to another. Now, there are some benefits because we get a chance to reflect. But you suddenly start to realize that if you can stop being in the future, and as you said, stop being in the past. So stop worrying about what you did in the past. Stop worrying about what you're going to do in the future. Just be in the present and enjoy those people that you find yourself coming into company in the now, because you don't know and you don't want to regret the fact that you could have used the now to make their lives more fulfilling.
Well, now there's an interesting one. Consciousness is actually the material now. Unconsciousness is actually a future material something or a past remembrance. Both are unconscious. Both are immaterial because that materiality doesn't exist now. And the past one has already dissolved into the current reorganization of particles in a state of time or a presence in time. So unconscious versus consciousness, is a material now versus an immaterial past or future, which may not actually materialize in that form in the future, or wasn't a happy materialization in the past. But we're happy, be material, be present, be in the now, be conscious, be aware of where you are, dream of the unconscious new, and materialize it in all the nows till then.
And I think that's the best way to end, because you're suddenly telling us to be ourselves in the universe that we exist in now. Thanks everybody for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the show that we've just now produced. Bye for now.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.